All right, hey guys. So I've been having a problem with my car. I've been tuning it myself. I have a 2010 Hyundai Genesis Coupe with a TDO5 TDO5 16G turbo with bigger injectors. Um, that's basically the only thing that I have to tune in. Everything else is just bolt-ons and crap like that. But anyways, I've been having trouble with it. I have my Platinum Pro Series ECU manager. I have a Platinum Pro Series ECU in it, and this is the ECU manager for that. Anyways, I've been having problems with when I'm driving it and it's all the way up to temperature, which is around 176 to 190. I find that when I let it sit, my air inlet temperature and everything inside my engine bay will get really hot, and then for some reason, it leans out my AFRs after I start. And so much so that my temperature sensor was reading like 170 degrees one time, and my wideband was reading like the leanest conditions, and my car is like stuttering. It barely starts. Like it's just a crappy hot start. And it only happens when I let it sit and let that heat from the engine go spread throughout my engine bay. If I just turn it off when it's at temp and then turn it right back on again, there's no problem. So I'm gonna show you guys how to fix this issue, or at least how I did it. If you guys, if there's somebody who knows more that watches this video, I would greatly appreciate it if you could educate me if I'm doing something wrong, or if you notice anything, like any of these values based off when the engine is running or anything that I need to fix. I mean, obviously my fuel map is not great, and I know that. I still have to tune this. I just don't have a dyno, and I'm trying to tune on the road. Um, anyways, as if you guys can help me, I would greatly appreciate it. Anything that's super obvious to you. Um, but yeah, so I'll just show you guys how I fixed it. All right, so now we're in the car, and I've got the temperatures up to this operating temperature, and then this is 134 degrees Fahrenheit, and I've seen it just from driving around and having it sit. I've seen it as high as 170, and it barely started. Like it was running so fucking lean, or so lean. Um, So I'm just going to show you guys, this is no correction at all. This is the problem that I'm experiencing. So it starts up, and then my O2, my wideband sensor takes a bit to heat up. But there you go. Now it's heated up. And this maxes out at 16.8, but on my gauge, it's sitting at 17.1, 17.3, 17.4, 17.7, 17.8. And it's not even start correcting it until my O2 gets heated up, or my warm up time is done, which I have. Disregard those times. They're not going to stay like that. But yeah, this has nothing to do with it. But all I'm saying is, look, these corrections are ridiculous. Like 16% correction. It seems like it's completely like ruined, right? So I'm just going to show you guys how to fix this properly. And you might already see this. So basically, we're going to need to have the long-term fuel trims added in order to not be uh, lean in these conditions when my inlet air temperature is super hot. So even if I was to drive around, which I won't be doing because I can't really drive around and look at the laptop and talking to the mic all at once, um, these trims are going to stay the same. This long-term fuel trim is going to stay the same and actually be accurate across the whole time, because it's basically seeing that across all RPM ranges and all load ranges. At least it's kind of divvied up how this works, but it's still adding that fuel. So it's actually good to use this because um, as you drive, no matter where you are, it'll always be adding this 13%, whatever cell you end up being in. It'll always be adding that 13%, this 12%. Um, and that's exactly what you want. So I'll show you how to set up that first. So you're just gonna click F4 or setup, and then go to main, or not main, advanced. And I know on the Elite series it's a little bit different, but it should be all the same terminology. So at least for my Platinum Pro series here, I turn on my long-term fuel trim, and then I go to the long-term fuel trim. And for me, it runs so lean, especially when the air temps get so high. So I have a full max trim of 20% as high as it will go, and then max per session 10%. Um, and I've seen that this works well. And then as I drive around, I've noticed that, and then just like 3% because I want my map to be better than because I think stock is 5 activation point, and then it takes 5 seconds to start activating, but then I have a short period and a pretty high increment, or I guess a low increment, but slowly it'll gradually raise at a pretty decent rate. And once it starts to cool down and the air starts flowing through the wherever your air inlet temperature sensor is, which mine's in my intake manifold, wherever that may be, if it's before the throttle body or not, it'll be measuring that, and then it'll go back. See how it's already going down. It's down to 9 now. Um, and it's slowly dropping as these temperatures go down. And they probably won't get too much further below this since I'm just sitting at idle. As you drive around, though, of course, the wind and you're driving and the air intercooler will cool down the air and everything. So this will drop much faster. Yeah, so I'm going to show you how to fix this because uh, this is only a 130-degree start. I've had to 170-degree starts, and my car could have been sitting longer, and it could have got even hotter, most likely. And that was only a 70-degree day, so imagine a 100-degree day or plus, so it's going to be way worse. So all you're going to do is you're going to set up a new table. So in Haltech, they have these generic tables. This is, I guess, it's kind of based on newbies because I'm a newbie. So yeah, all you're going to do is go to fuel corrections, and then you have these 2 different tables you can add. So I'm just going to add one, and it might already saved it. What I had, yeah. So I'll just add a different one. So add this one, apply, okay. And then on this table, what you can do is click F3 or setup. It's the same button as this. Or no, not that, but F3. And then you enable the axes, and then you'll select on my horizontal axis, I want my engine running time. So just put that in. And then on this axis, I want my air inlet temperature or air temp sensor. And then what I do for these values is just match um, what my other see. I just match these values so that each box, when it's actually on target, it'll actually correlate with it'll just be easy to tune basically, like the coolant temperature and then like the where is it? The post start enrichment, like where it goes by 2 and then 10 and 15, all that. So I'm just gonna fill up this table. I'll get back to you guys when I'm done. All right, so now I have my table set up and I set it all the way to 3 minutes. And so I'm just gonna fill out this table. So I'm not actually connected, so it's not a valid value, but here we go. Yeah, so we're up to 140 and we can do another one. The reboot. But so we were sitting at like 17 and a half or so. And from my experience, at least with this car, and we were right around 130 or so. So I'm just gonna highlight both these boxes. Um, right around 130 or so. So about one AFR point is about 20%. So I'm going to go. Well, I already have a table like this, so I know exactly or pretty close to what I need. So I'll just go like that. And you're obviously gonna have to tune this yourself, and it's gonna be different for all the cars. But and then as well as the table is, from my experience, when there's extra fuel here, it's gonna be adding on to the post-start enrichment and to potentially the coolant temps correction, which most likely not. So it'll be adding just onto the post-start enrichment. And I've experienced not being able to start because there's just too much fuel. So I leave this at 0 and then let it taper. So yeah, and then I get it to 15. And obviously you're gonna have to tune this just like your post-start enrichment, where you're just looking at your AFRs and getting it to what you want. And I try to aim for like 13 and a half at the start. And then after about 30 seconds, I want it to be down to 14. Or at least until my O2 correction and my long-term fuel trims have kicked in this case. So that would be normal, but we're doing this long-term field trim thing. So I normally would cut this in half, and then kind of just lower this slightly. as it goes down. That way, it'll slowly, ideally, you'd have to touch it up. But then as well as this, if you have any values on this, it's going to add this to your base fuel map forever. So this has to be 0. The last engine running time cell. Just it's the same thing as a post-start enrichment. If you've done this before, which this table isn't fully done, but I have to touch that up more. But it has to be 0, or else you're going to be having those extra um, corrections the entire time the engine is running. So we're all the way up to 146 now, so we can get a good run. And I'm just going to actually copy this up to the next cell. So we're going to start it. And then with the long-term fuel trims, when it starts to divvy out, once it gets to this point and starts to cool off, it'll get caught by this long-term fuel trim. And then you will be running clean the whole time. So I'm just going to go ahead and start the engine. Starts right up. And then this is still in its heat cycle. I need to get a different setup, but it's running smoothly until I know. And so right here, it's at 14.8, so I'm going to be adding fuel here. Now it's at 15.1, so let's add more. Catch these up. And then at this point, I want it to be, oh, it's too much. So at this point, I want it to be around 14.7, and that's actually dead on right now, 14.6. But at this point, the O2 correction is catching. And as you can see, the long-term fuel trims are going to start kicking in. Little lean, so I'm just going to add. And I am kind of chasing my tail here because I have my long-term fuel trims and my O2 correction on while I'm correcting this, so it's not ideal. But I'm sitting good now. 4% correction, so I could potentially be adding more. But at this point, I kind of want it to start turning into long-term fuel trim, so that's fine. And as you can see, this the air temperature slowly will go down to a certain point if you're idling, and that's great. That's going to fix the problem, at least in my experience. Whatever it is that's getting too hot, it seems to correlate with the air inlet temperature. So looking good, staying a solid 3% correction. And now let's look. Where are we at? We're just past 2 minutes. And now, as you can see, it's going to start to go up as we taper off and our output value slowly goes down to 0. There we go. Starting to pick up the 5%. And this is not even that bad of a case. It really depends on the situation. I've seen where it's starts at 130 and I'm getting like 12% correction here. So it's really just depends on, uh, obviously, I don't think it's the air inlet temperature sensor because it's just a sensor and there's no correction. There's something else in my engine bay that's getting heat soaked and making this act weird. But it seems to me, at least, that this is a good way, at least the correlation between the air inlet temperature sensor and whatever is getting heat soaked and causing these lean conditions is, good enough to fix this problem. And now we are past the time, so this should be 0. It's 0. And my applied long-term fuel trim is 5.6. And this whole time, we've been steady at 14.7. And as we drive around, our air inlet temperature will increase, which doesn't matter, I guess, but whatever is in my engine bay that's heat soaked will slowly cool off, and these values and these corrections will go lower. And then since we have our long-term fuel trim set up correctly, or at least this seems to be working well for me, where the increment and the period are pretty fast and the activation timer is not too long, it'll read that and then go down to lower long-term fuel terms, and then you'll be driving normally. So something I forgot to mention in the last part was that you have to set up your conditions for these maps because the generic correction tables won't actually input this extra 14.9 or whatever the cell is. It won't actually input that amount of fuel unless the conditions are met. So just hit F4 and then you'll go to your generic correction map, fuel generic correction map. And then for me, since this is based off of my engine running time and my air temp sensor, I have it to where as as, as long as the temperature, the air temp sensor is a greater than 104 degrees, and as long as my engine running time is less than 30 seconds, then it will, wait, so this is wrong. It should be higher than that. So as long as it's less than 120 seconds of my engine running time, then, and it says and, so both of these conditions have to be met in order for this table to actually change the fueling. So just make sure those are set or else it's not going to do anything. And it was kind of frustrating, but after you figure it out, it actually is kind of a handy tool in case you need to make different maps. So yeah, that's the end of the video. That's all I really wanted to show is how to fix these really crappy heat soak hot starts. And if I even taught one person or helped one person at all, then this would have been totally worth it. But if not, then it'll be kind of fun just to make the video. Anyways, and I might be making more videos like this, just about little things that I've learned from tuning my own car. So yeah, anyways, I might just see you in the next video, I guess. I don't freaking know what to say. Anyways, yep, that is how you do heat soak hot starts.